Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Made the Cut 2 video. Today, we're going to be reviewing your hottest takes as submitted on my community posts. Now, before we get started, I just want to say, if you want to leave a comment on something like this, all you have to do is go to my channel, click on the little tab that says posts. It should be across the middle there, where it says videos, live, playlists. Click on the little tab that says posts. It'll take you to that section, and you can leave a comment if you ever want to participate in anything like this. So, with that being said, let's hop right into it. Going with our first comment, which is from @TopHitter21. Who says the pitch clock has been one of the best rule changes in the history of the game. Now, in my opinion, this is not that hot of a take. Sure, there are some people out there that are like, I miss the 3.5 hour games. I miss the music of watching a hitter step out and take 14 timeouts, watching 17 pickoffs to first base, all this type of thing, which, by the way, 17 pickoffs to first base has happened before. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people at all. I think the pitch clock has been one of the best changes ever because, in my opinion, there's really relatively no downside. Sure, there have been people who theorized injuries and blah, 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 and all that stuff. It's a cardio thing, in my opinion, right? Ligaments, your ligaments, the force you exert on your ligaments from throwing is going to be relatively the same, even if you're throwing relatively quickly, right? There's no data to suggest that throwing 5 times in 10 minutes versus 5 times in 2 minutes from a wear perspective is worse, at least not significantly so. So the injury argument, I think, is ridiculous. I love how quickly games move along now in terms of action. A big problem I used to have, even for me, and I've made a lot of content. I love baseball. It can get kind of boring at times when it's like, okay, ball low and outside, step out, readjust batting gloves, Nomar Garcia-Parra style, step back in, guy on first base, we pick off over to first base, guy steps back out, guy steps back in, foul ball, steps out, readjust batting gloves. It can get kind of tedious, right? Now there's limits on it. So you're forced to actually watch baseball being played instead of, well, not forced, but you get to watch baseball being played instead of being forced to watch all this extracurricular stuff. I think it's a great change. I don't think it's that hot a take. I definitely agree with it. JStorm 2066 says Harrison Bader is one of the most underrated players in MLB. I fully agree with this one. Harrison, if you look at his numbers from last year, dude had around an 800 OPS, if not a slightly over 800 OPS, hit for some solid pop, got on base solidly, obviously as indicated by the OPS, was a good base runner, and one of the best fielders on a rate basis. If I'm not mistaken, he had like 9 fielding runs, 8 or 9 fielding runs. That's incredible for a guy who profiles a 4th outfielder coming into the season. I think this offseason, if I'm not mistaken, he's a free agent, right? This offseason, he's going to get a starting job somewhere, right? And maybe still he'll be an 7, 8, 9 hitter. With the way he hit this year, a 2 hitter would be a possibility. But I think still at the minimum, he probably is a 7, 8, 9 hitter. But an everyday guy playing elite defense in center field with good base running and solid hitting, that's a great player. And it's definitely, he's underrated relative to a lot of other guys with similar profiles. He was playing behind Nick Castellanos versus righties for part of the year, right? Even after the Phillies got him. Nick Castellanos has a worse OPS versus righties. And a much worse fielder. Manga Freakable. Great name. My hot take is the salary cap conversation blowing up is less about the Dodgers and more so a manufactured fan issue ignited by owners to use for evidence during the upcoming CBA negotiations. I agree with this. Fully. I have a bit of a hot take myself here. I don't think these lockout conversations are going to take 6 months. I don't think they're going to be a full year. Call me optimistic, but the owners have seen what happened to baseball last time that happened. 1994, it happened in 1981. It always coincided with a huge lack of momentum for their sport. They desperately don't want that to happen. I think that they're spreading this propaganda that there's a huge lockout incoming so they can garner fan support, right? Because if they say, oh, we're headed towards a lockout and it's both sides and we can't agree, it makes it seem like they're one of 2 reasonable parties. When the truth is, in this case, the owners are being unreasonable. Why do the owners want a salary cap? So they can spend less money. Why do the owners want to make it seem like it's going to take a long time? So fans can get mad at the players for not just giving in to, reasonable demands. Don't fall for it. It is propaganda. It's billionaire/owner propaganda. I don't think it's going to last that long, and I also don't think this salary cap is the be-all, end-all. A lot of people want to make it seem to be. Why is it that the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl every freaking year, and for a long time it was the Patriots, right? And if I'm not mistaken, there's a salary cap in football, right? Why is it? Same thing for basketball. There's a salary cap in basketball, and yet it's always the same 5 teams, right? For hockey, I mean, look, the Florida Panthers have won 2 years in a row, and there's been a salary cap in there for a while now. The problem is organizational management, right? The best run organizations, you can give them any parameters you want to, and they're going to win within them. And the terrible organizations, the Rockies, the A's, they're always going to fail because they're badly run, and they're also cheaply run, right? This isn't going to change the fact that Dick Manfred is paying 6 guys to do his analytics. He's not going to hire more just because the salary cap goes up or down or whatever. So I agree with that. That's a great take, Manga Freakable. At Star Huddle 77, Julio Rodriguez is a stud for the entire season for the first time. I'm assuming you mean in 2026, and wins the AL MVP with a 50-50 season. That's a hot take. That's a hot take. I disagree. In order to hit 50 home runs in a season, let alone 50 homers in T-Mobile Park, which is a tough ballpark to hit homers in, you got to be a Cal Raleigh, which is you got to hit the ball hard and you got to pull the ball in the air. Julio does not pull the ball in the air with the best of them, and he hits the ball hard, but he doesn't hit it as hard as Cal Raleigh does. On top of that, you need to control his chase, right? Cal Raleigh also chases, but a big thing is when Cal Raleigh chases, he swings and misses, which gives him further attempts in his plate appearance, right? If he swings and misses on a 1-1, he's still got another pitch to work with. Julio makes more contact on those pitches. So on a 1-1, when Julio swings, he's more likely to dribble it to second base or shortstop, which you're just never going to hit a homer on, right? So I think Julio's got to get his plate discipline under control if he wants to challenge for even 40 homers in a season. And he also would need to start pulling fly balls more, which he's got a flatter swing. I don't see that happening. But hey, man, he's got amazing talent, right? It's possible. Feels unlikely. The extra innings Ghost Runner was a positive change. Well, the extra inning Ghost Runner was a positive change for MLB from Sushi I3C. I agree. As somebody who was at ALDS Game 5 this year that went 5 full hours, one of the things I could often find myself thinking was, this is fine because it's the postseason, right? You don't want this to be decided by some phantom runner. But if I put myself in the shoes of a manager, if this was an August game, and we're 15 innings in, let's say it's the first game of a series, or hell, the third game of a series, and we're on a long road trip, and now every guy I got in that bullpen's exhausted, and I'm using starters and all that, it could literally ruin the next 2 weeks, right? That could be the difference in your season trying to win this one game. I mean, you'd be tempted to throw a position player out there in the 14th inning just to save the rest of your bullpen, because one game isn't as important as the next 3, right? If you win that game and then go 0 for 3 over your next 3, you're 1-3. So I think it's really good in the regular season. I wouldn't want it in the postseason. I think it's really good in the regular season. And I think, honestly, if you polled managers, especially managers now who are so worried about bullpen management, they'd probably agree. Raptor4916 says, Shohei Ohtani is just 2 third or fourth ballot Hall of Famers trapped in one body. Now, I think this is a disservice to 2 parties. First of all, to Hall of Fame pitchers. I love Shohei. Shohei's ERA plus for his career, by the way, if you want to look this up, it's actually a crazy stat, is higher than Justin Verlander's, right? That's crazy to me. I think it's higher than Max Scherzer's. The problem is, both of those guys are going to probably have thrown double the amount of innings by the time Shohei retires, right? Shohei is a volume guy on offense and the inverse on the mound, right? He's probably going to finish with, at the most, if we're being optimistic, 1,500 innings pitching. Maybe 2,000. Maybe. And at that point, you'd have to make an argument as like a Jacob deGrom type argument, right? Where it's like, he's so good on a rate basis that it actually justifies being a Hall of Famer. At that point, he would not be your third or fourth ballot, right? At that point, he's probably more like an 8th or 9th, if he was only a pitcher. With that being said, hitting-wise, the dude's a first ballot. And look at all of his numbers relative to Hall of Fame standards. The dude's got like a career, if I'm not mistaken, like a career 170, 180 OPS plus. Over the last 3 seasons, he has had historically good numbers. Throwing the stolen bases, it's even better. He's been averaging over 40 homers a season. It might be over 50 at this point because he's hit 50 in the last 2, but he's been averaging over 40 homers a season at a minimum. He's got a near 3.45 slash, right? Or I'm sorry, 3.46 slash. The dude's elite. He's first ballot Hall of Famer hitting wise. And because he is predominantly DH, I don't see that changing over the next 10 years, right? All of his batted ball data, he hits the ball a top 3 hardest in the game. He hits the ball on a top 3 best angle in the game. He doesn't hit too many grounders. He pulls a lot of fly balls. All of his metrics are pointing up in terms of hitting. There's no reason he should fall off in that regard. So I think he's more like a first ballot Hall of Famer hitting wise, mixed with like a Veterans Committee conversation pitching wise. But when you add those 2 things together, I mean, you get a unanimous Hall of Famer unless somebody pulls an Ichiro on him, which is just, I mean, that was disrespectful. But Jackson McMahon, 4147, says the Miami Marlins win their first division title in franchise history in 2026. Now, listen, I'm all in support of the Marlins. I hate that their management is as bad as it is. I hate that their ownership is as bad as it is. Well, I'll just say the ownership, right? The management was fine this past year. I hate that they're run the way they are. It's bad, right? I mean, every time they get a superstar player, he's shipped off. So I'm rooting for them. I am. If you think they're going to overtake the Phillies, who won 93, 94 games last year, if you think they're going to overtake the Mets, who that drastically disappointed yet still finished 4 games better than them, if you think they're going to overtake the Braves, who finished behind them, but have a bunch of guys who are going to be healthy this season, and I'm sure AA is not going to be happy with the kind of year they had, so he's going to try to improve that. New manager. If you think they're going to be better than all 3 of those teams, if they're better than 2 of those teams, I will be floored. If they're better than all 3 of those teams, that's a near miracle, right? They just don't have the firepower those teams do. Now, maybe they could go on a Cincinnati Reds 2025-esque run where they sneak in on the back end with 84, 85 wins, but it's going to be really, really tough. Really, really tough. So that's definitely a hot take. I get where you're coming from. That's definitely a hot take. Now we have Sharko Caster. A's will make it to the postseason next season. I just want to say, by the way, if I ended up skipping over your questions because it kind of addressed something that I'd already discussed, I just discussed the Marlins. I just discussed the Mets there in that previous question, which is why I didn't address the one right above that. So, but as for Sharko Caster, A's will make it to postseason next season. Who are they going to beat to get there? Are they going to beat the Tigers? Tigers, in my opinion, are probably going to be better than they were this year unless they trade Skubal, at which point it'll be largely contingent on the package they get. But I don't see them being worse than 87 wins. Do you see the Guardians as not making the postseason? Because they got a little lucky this year relative to the predictive metrics, but they still have a good team. They still are run pretty well when it comes to management and such stuff like that. The ownership needs to invest in the team, for goodness sake. But I mean, they got young guys coming up. Bazana might be there next year. They have some good young talent in the minor leagues. Great young pitching, as they always do. Do you think they're going to overtake the Astros, who are, I mean, had a 99th percentile injury year last year, where it's like everybody on their roster was injured for at least half the season? I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, yeah, even if they end up losing Fromberg, they're still going to go out and get something, I'm sure. Do you think that they're going to overtake the Mariners, who still have one of the best returning rosters in the American League? Like, you know, who are you going to overtake the Red Sox, who have one of the best young farm systems as well as one of the best young major league rosters? I don't see it happening unless they drastically change their philosophy when it comes to pitching. But even then, they're playing in a minor league ballpark. They could go out and get Tarek Skubal, and he might have a 3.50 ERA next year because every hit he gives up's a homer. It's tough to win that way. Justin Steele bounces back in a huge way. He gets Cy Young votes. That's from Truly True. Please donate. That's another great name. Justin Steele could be a 2.80 ERA guy. He's not going to get like Cy Young votes, at least in terms of like relevant Cy Young votes. I'm not saying he couldn't finish top 10 maybe. So if that's what you're saying, if he's going to finish top 10, then I agree that's a possibility. But we're looking at coming off of a major surgery. We're looking at a guy who averages 92, 93 on his fastball. We're looking at a guy who doesn't have an exceptional breaking ball. He has some good breaking balls, but not exceptional. He has a good changeup. Nothing about him points to, in my opinion, top 5, maybe even top 10 Cy Young. Yeah, he had a great season before he got hurt. Don't get me wrong. 2023, if I'm not mistaken, 2024 was really, really good, right? Do I see that continuing to challenge Apolsky, Zach Wheeler, Chris Sale, any number of other young guys, Yamamoto? No, I don't see that. I don't think he has the pitch mix for it. And I also don't think that coming back from injury, he's going to be able to get right back on the horse that easily. Now we have Caleb Viria 4801, who says Manfred has been extremely good for baseball. Almost every rule he's implemented has grown the sport to a new level, whether it's player safety or fan engagement. This is my opinion on Rob Manfred. He's done some great stuff. He's done some not so great stuff. A lot of the rule changes have been good, right? The catching, protecting catchers, the pace of play stuff, the extra inning runner. I like all that stuff, right? But I think it's going to come down. Some of the marketing has been, my opinion, worse than it could have been. He's had some, like I said, some questionable decisions. Going around and doing a press tour in the middle of the season for a lockout is one of them. However, his legacy is going to come down to one thing, in my opinion. Is he going to be the guy who oversees Major League Baseball's third major lockout, right? 81, 94. Is he going to be the guy that oversees that? Or is he going to be the guy that bridges the gap between the owners and the players and prevents that from taking a really long time? Like I said, the owners do not want a long lockout. I don't see it being half the season. I could see it being 1 month, like 1 month later for spring training or something. If he can keep it to that, I think his legacy holds up pretty well. Because then he's got a bunch of positive stuff that he's done, and he brokered a big deal. If the season gets canceled or moved 4 months down the line, or basically like it really hurts the 2027, 2028 season, whichever one that is going to be when the CBA expires, I think it's 2027. If that happens, his name could end up being dirt. It could override the entire bevy of other things he's done, right? So I think it's going to come down to that. Like I said, there's some good and there's some bad with him. I think overall he's been a pretty good commissioner. That's going to determine everything. That fella, F2L, says PCA will fix his chasing issues and will return to his first half form for the majority of next season. Now, I just answered a Cubs question, right? So you might be asking, why am I answering another one? Because I really want to talk about PCA and how he needs to be good. If you're PCA, and I made a video about this, so if you're curious about that, you can go check that out on my main channel. If you're PCA and you look at how you're good, when you're good, it was predominantly when he was chasing a little bit more than he was in the second half of last season, but he wasn't chasing extreme pitches, and he was hitting those pitches pretty hard. Last season, in the latter half of the season, he became much more passive. His swing decisions got very conservative relative to what it had been earlier on in the season. And it threw him off. He was hitting balls softer. He was hitting balls more on the ground. He was even striking out more, which is crazy to say because he was striking out a lot before. I think for him, it's not about fixing chasing issues. It's about refining his chase issues / profile, right? He needs to not swing at pitches at his eyes because you're not going to get hits there. He needs to not swing at pitches that are in the dirt, like bouncing 10 feet in front of the plate. You're not going to get hits there. But he does need to swing at pitches outside the zone. Based on what we saw last season, he does need to swing at those pitches because if he doesn't, if he starts taking those, if he gets conservative, he ends up not doing as well. Now, maybe he ends up reinventing his whole profile and does a lot better. Sure, that's possible. Seems unlikely. Generally speaking, guys kind of stick to the profile that they came up with marginal changes. So I don't think he needs to be have lower chasing. I think he more so needs to be selective with it, and I also don't think he's ever going to return to an 850 OPS over a full season unless something drastic changes. I think an 800 OPS, along with his ridiculously productive fielding and base running, I think that he would be, a top 10 most valuable player in the sport. So / in the National League. So I think that's really, a good bar for him. If he ends up like really progressing, color me wrong. That could end up being a hot take of mine, but I think that's relatively safe to say. And then the last one, fruit is pineapple, 60-64. Yamamoto is a lock for the Cy Young next season. I think this is definitely a hot take. This, in my opinion, is preposterous. A lock is crazy to say. I think if Skeens gets injured, you might have which by the way would be horrible. I'm not rooting for that in any way. But if Skeens got injured, you might have a conversation. But even then, does he even become the front runner? Maybe after this World Series ends, and let's say he has a really great end of the postseason after this whole postseason, which he's been awesome in, maybe. But you've got guys that like Chris Sale, who was a little hurt this last year, but still was just as good as he was during his Cy Young winning season. You've got guys like Zach Wheeler. You got some of the young pitchers that are coming up throughout, a multitude of different pipelines who have super high upside. Do I think that he is so much better than all of those guys? He's a lock? No, I don't. Hunter Green? Lock over Hunter Green? I don't think so. I think he could win it. Let's say Paul Skeens gets injured, because I do think that's kind of the contingency. I don't see Paul Skeens going out there and having another sub-2 ERA and not winning another Cy Young. He's going to definitely win one this year. But if Paul Skeens were to go down with an injury, or even maybe he drastically regresses. I see it as unlikely, but maybe he does so. Do I see him as being the guy that steps in and immediately wins it? It's tougher than that. He's not a lock. Now, thank you guys so much for all of your hot take questions. Like I said, if you want to go there and go to my community post and potentially submit a question yourself for any future thing I do like this, go ahead and go to my channel, go to posts, and then if there's a recent question, you can submit. If not, that's fine too. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day.